let me let you in on a little bit of a secret. I'm going to make you look really smart to your friends. I'm going to tell you which 4 teams are being criminally slept on in the 2024 season and are going to make the playoffs.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me?
I have done this for 3 years now, and I'm batting 500. And here's how we're going to define a sleeper team. A sleeper team is the following. A team with little to no hype that did not make the playoffs in the year previous, but can make the playoffs this year. Now, you could be saying, Mike, how can I trust you? This is my track record over the past 2 years. In 2022, my 4 teams were the New York Giants, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Detroit Lions, and the Houston Texans. And in 2023, my 4 teams were the following. The Atlanta Falcons, the Cleveland Browns, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Denver Broncos. So as you can see here, I'm batting 500. In 2022, the Giants and the Jags hit. The Detroit Lions and the Houston Texans went on to become the powerhouses I thought they were in the following year. Now in 2023, we were close, and I really thought the Falcons were going to win that division when everybody was saying, oh, Mike, you're an idiot. It's going to be the Saints and Derek Carr. Desmond Ridder was as bad as I thought he was, and not as bad as he actually was. The Falcons would have gone to the playoffs. Denver Broncos, they were one danger witch away from making the playoffs. So with all that out of the way, we're going to look at the 4 sleeper teams for 2024 that are going to make the playoffs that nobody is talking about. And I want to give a disclaimer because some of you are going to be like, oh, well, you didn't mention this team and they're definitely going to make the playoffs. Yeah, well, if they're definitely going to make the playoffs, they're not a sleeper. So we're going to say honorable mention list right now. Disclaimer. For teams like the Bengals or the Chargers that didn't make the playoffs last year because of injury, like Joe Burrow got hurt or Brandon Staley somehow was an NFL head coach for an extended period of time, they don't really count because they should be expected to make the playoffs. Honestly, I really thought about putting the Chargers on this list, but it's so obvious that the Chargers are going to make the playoffs or can make the playoffs that I'm disqualifying them. So the honorable mention is the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks have actually a pretty good chance to make the playoffs, and nobody's really talking about them, to be honest. Jets are just getting too much noise right now, even though I'm way higher on them than everybody else. I think they can legitimately go to the AFC Championship. That's how good their defense is. And the Cleveland Browns would have made this list, but they made the playoffs last year, so they are disqualified. So the first team on this list is the Arizona Cardinals. And admittedly, I have not been the biggest Kyler Murray fan. But even I can see that he's the second most talented quarterback in that division behind Matthew Stafford. If you're going to tell me for 1 second you think Brock Purdy is more God-givenly talented than Kyler Murray, you are out of your mind. And on top of having the second most talented quarterback in the division, the Cardinals only took 1 year, really 1 year, technically 2, but really 1 year, to replace DeAndre Hopkins with the premier talent for Kyler in the form of Marvin Harrison Jr., who is probably the best wide receiver prospect since like Julio Jones. I don't know why we ever pretended that Hollywood Brown would eat in Arizona. I don't know why we pretend that Hollywood Brown is going to eat anywhere. He bounces from elite quarterback to Kyler, who was kind of viewed as an elite, definitely above average for an extended period of time. He didn't eat there. And then now he's on the Chiefs, and we're pretending. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but Hollywood Brown is bad. In just 8 games played with Kyler, coming off the ACL tear, Kyler averaged 224 passing yards per game. He had 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a 65.7% completion percentage, which I'm not sure if that's a career high, but it's definitely close to his career high number. Let's talk about the sexy things that the Cardinals did this offseason to their offense, okay? They went out, they draft Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, we already talked about him. Then they go ahead and get a high upside home run hitting running back to back up James Conner and Trey Benson. And they had Trey McBride break out last year in 2023. But let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. The Cardinals were poverty at a lot of things when it comes to playing football in 2023. But you know what's one thing they were not bad at? Running the football. And people are going to say, oh, well, we don't know the identity of the Cardinals going into 2024. I bet you I know the identity of the Cardinals going into 2024. It's called a balanced offense. They're still going to run the ball. They're giving us every sign and every indication that they're going to run the ball. They traded up for Trey Benson. They drafted a run-blocking tight end with upside. Here's how they finished 2023 when it comes to running the ball and what their offense looked like. They ranked 4th in rushing yards per game at 139.1, 19th in total yards per game at 324.1, mostly without Kyler Murray, and 26th in passing yards per game at 184.9. We can expect this to regress a little bit in terms of the rushing yards per game, and the passing yards per game are going to have some positive regression. It's going to become a balanced offense. You don't get your franchise QB back and get him one of the best wide receivers ever and just stop running the ball if you were so good at it in 2023. Now let's talk about some of the less sexy things to talk about. And I really like how the Cardinals put their best foot forward to keep Kyler upright. They added Isaiah Adams, who projects to be a guard, and they added a Christian Jones from Texas to play behind Jonah Williams. Now let's talk about the defense for a second. I know. PFF is not gospel. I'm not here to tell you it is gospel. But if you look at this defense on paper, let me tell you what it looked like. It looked like what Madden gives you when you start an Ultimate Team. It was just the worst grouping of players you have ever seen. This team was so bad at stopping the run that if you put a group of 6th graders in a room with the ending scene of Transformers 1 listening to Optimus Prime's monologue, they're probably going to rush for 100 yards on the Cardinals. The Cardinals allowed the league worst 143.18 rushing yards per game and pretty much generated a negative pass rush. And to be honest, I wish the Cardinals did more to help Jonathan Gannon, as he is a defensive head coach, and I think that head coaches should fix their side of the ball first. But I give him props for understanding that this defense is so far away and we have a weapon in Kyler Murray to facilitate this offense. Let's do everything we can to make Kyler Murray successful in this offense, because that's how we're going to win games in 2024. And let's remember that at the end of 2023, and I think in the beginning of 2023, one game without Kyler against the Dallas Cowboys, the Cardinals beat them. And with Kyler, they beat the Eagles. So let's stop acting like the Cardinals should have been picking 4th overall. I don't think they were going to be world beaters last year with Kyler, but they're set up really well, and Jonathan Gannon definitely impressed me in 2023. So if you factor all of this in, I really do think that there is a good chance that the Cardinals can sneak into the wild card. Now, over to Lucas Oil Stadium, we go to the Indianapolis Colts. And in the AFC South, the talk of the town is really 2 or 3 things. America's sweetheart and America's new team, the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud, Micah Parsons' podcast, Brisket, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are wondering if the newly paid Prince Who Was Promised can save the Jaguars. But what about the Colts? Why is nobody talking about the Colts? I mean, this was a team that was legitimately one play away from beating the Houston Texans and going to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew as their quarterback. And pretty much without Jonathan Taylor for most of the year. The Colts, similarly to the Cardinals, were at a very bad defense in 2023. They had a below-average passing offense, like the Cardinals. They also had an above-average rushing offense, like the Cardinals. In 2023, the Colts ranked 10th in points scored per game, 15th in total yards per game, 20th in passing yards per game, and 10th in rushing yards per game. And do not forget that Jonathan Taylor missed the first 7 games because he vanished on Jim Irsay's luxury bus for like 3 weeks, and no one talks about how weird that was. The biggest issue in the 2023 Colts season was they showed up on Sunday and their secondary forgot what they got paid to do. They literally would go out there and pretty much do nothing. And then they asked Gardner Minshew to throw the ball. The Colts defense was 28th in points against per game, 24th in total yards against per game, 16th in passing yards allowed per game, 24th in rushing yards against per game. We all remember that Nico Collins catch when he torched Julius Brents for that touchdown in Week 18 in the pseudo playoff game. We all remember the drop pass on 4th down. They threw it to a running back who I don't even remember his name, but it wasn't Jonathan Taylor. We all remember when our dad went to get milk and never came back. The Colts defensive line actually looks kind of good on paper with the added depth of Raekwon Davis, and they drafted one of my favorite players in the entire class in Liatu Latu. We had the best rusher in the draft. This team is by no means not talented. It was literally one pass away from toppling America's sweetheart in CJ Stroud. The Colts heavily fortified this offensive line in the draft with Tanner Bordolini, Matt Conclaves, and finally have a wide receiver too who is not white in A.D. Mitchell. And they might be the only offensive line in all of the NFL that is entirely white. If this team can just move towards the league median in points against per game, they will make the playoffs. And this offense, let me remind you, there's no tape on it because they never got to roll out the offense they wanted with Anthony Richardson. So this team is going to be really scrappy. It's going to catch people off guard, and it's going to be one of the most fun, fast-paced offenses in the NFL. Heading to the land of bachelor parties and bachelorette parties, we go to Nashville, Tennessee. Will Levis is the biggest winner this offseason because Will Levis is the biggest winner this offseason because he's now dating Victoria Fuller. Will Levis is the biggest winner this offseason because Rand Carthon has done everything possible to set him up for success this season. Rand Carthon has also issued in a new era for the Titans by not only throwing out Mike Vrabel, for better or for worse, that was pretty questionable. They also let go of Derrick Henry, who has been the catalyst, the engine, the identity of this team for years. And now they bring in Brian Callahan, who was the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. The interesting thing to me when I look at the Titans is it's not going to be handing the ball off to Derrick Henry 50 times a game. Defenses are actually going to have to play defense. One other key addition, maybe the biggest addition, is the hiring of Brian's dad, Bill. How heartwarming. Bill Callahan has formed multiple top 5 offensive lines in the NFL. Already had Peter Skoronski, who I really liked coming out in 2023, and now they got J.C. Latham to play left tackle. The left side of this offensive line is fixed. Now we'll see if he can work his magic on the other not-so-talented players around. They also did bring in Lloyd Cushenberry, who was one of my favorite signings this offseason. This offense might have the shiciness of Joe Burrow with the weirdness of Will Levis eating bananas, but he's obviously doing something right if we look at his track record off the field. I digress. But this passing offense might actually be legit, and this run game is going to have the influence of the Browns' run game, which we have seen for years be very successful. And you could be saying, oh, Mike, well, they don't have the Nick Chubb. That's fine. Let's not forget in 2020 when the Browns had Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb both rush for 1,000 yards. The 4 biggest additions the Titans made to help Will Levis are Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, Victoria Fuller, and J.C. Latham. These additions were made to supplement what the Titans already had in their offense in Peter Skoronski, Tajay Spears, DeAndre Hopkins, and Gia Duddy. Will Levis, having played almost a full season in 2023, he was pretty impressive. His good was really good, but his bad was really, really bad. If Will Levis can learn to not play hero ball all the time and manage the game just a little bit, this passing offense can leap from 29th to somewhere in the teens. I got slammed in 2023 when I compared Will Levis to Carson Wentz. To talk about the defensive side of the ball, this team was so average, it was kind of disgusting. One of the only reasons the Titans did not win more games last season was because they only had 6 interceptions. They were 16th in points against per game, 18th in total yards against per game, 18th in passing yards against per game, 13th in rushing yards against per game, 14th in sacks, and 32nd in interceptions. Adding L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie should fix the problem and finally remedy years of whiffing on corner talent in the draft. For whatever reason, this team has been written off finishing last in the AFC South, and I really think it's going to be tighter than it seems. I would not be shocked at all to see Will Levis take a mammoth-sized step forward mid-season, similarly to how Jordan Love did, given Brian Callahan and the new weaponry in Tennessee. And for the first year, we have a returning team, the NFL's favorite punching bag, the New York Football Giants. The 2023 season could not have gone worse. They managed to squeeze out 6 wins despite this, with Tommy DeVito, Ty God Taylor, and a historical half by Daniel Jones in Arizona. The New York Giants fielded the worst possible, historically bad pass-protecting offensive line in the history of the NFL by a wide margin. They had key injuries to key players, including Andrew Thomas, and all over the roster, and Brian Daboll still somehow never lost the locker room. You could be saying, Mike, they lost Xavier McKinney and Pavquan Barkley. what are they going to do now? Well, let me tell you something. Apparently, moving on from an old running back is only a bad idea if you're the New York Giants. And you could be saying, well, he was the focal point of your offense. Wrong. The focal point of the New York Giants passing and run blocking offense is and always has been Andrew Thomas. And like good teams do, they move towards modern tendencies. The money not spent on injury-prone Barkley and Xavier McKinney was used for the 12th year in a row to fix the offensive line. Also traded for an elite pass rusher in Brian Burns, who the NFL seems to be very much so higher on than us common folk. Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Bobby Okereke are 3 potential all-pro level talents and could have a monster year under new DC and Shane Browen. And let's not forget about Deonte Banks, who had an excellent finish to his rookie year and hopefully can become the CB1 this team desperately needs. And people who aren't as psychotic as me would probably miss the addition of Brian Brasillo, who came over from Las Vegas to coach this offensive line. And if you did know that, you're not a casual, you're a ball knower. And if you're a ball knower, that's why you're watching this video. And no, Brian Brasillo should not be looked at as the savior to this offensive line, like he's just going to magically turn it around. But he did work wonders in Las Vegas. The roster is just simply better than what it was in 2022. And that 2022 team won a playoff game. And now, in my opinion, they added Jamar Chase level talent in Malik Neighbors, who will change the way defenses play the New York Giants in ways that Saquon just simply never could. There will be no more stacked boxes, no more shaded coverage for Darius Slayton, who's at best average to above average level wide receiver 2, and more 2 high looks for Wan'Dale Robinson and Devin Singletary to take advantage of. If Daniel Jones is even half of what I think he is, the Giants will be this year's surprise team, even though they're not a surprise. It's literally in plain sight. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. Why don't you go tell a friend? And if I made you laugh a little bit, can you just do me a favor and go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button? It's right here. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.